Greetings, fellow time travelers. Welcome back to Secrets of the Ancients, where we uncover the hidden mysteries of lost civilizations and dive deep into the secrets that shaped our world. I'm your archaeological guide, ready to take you on another mind-bending journey through the Thaffer. Bonkalter Thaffer one, Sabakrabise Destor, Avfobaffer Plam, Betatan von Botnin Names. Today's discovery will challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient engineering. Before we unveil these incredible secrets, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss the ancient mysteries we're about to reveal. Picture this scene with me, a structure 30 meters high, with 27 tons of pure gold covering the interior walls alone, bronze columns 8 meters tall, each weighing 34 tons, entire walls lined with imported cedar from Lebanon, polished cypress floors stretching as far as the eye can see, and giant golden cherubim, 4.5 meters tall, watching over everything. Solomon's temple wasn't just a religious building, it was the most expensive, most grandiose, and most technically advanced construction in the ancient world. It took 7 years to complete and consumed more gold than any other known structure of its time. But here's the detail that no one can explain. The foundation stones weighed up to 400 tons, without cranes, without metal pulleys, without proper wheels. How were blocks of this size cut, transported, and fitted with millimeter precision 3,000 years ago? Modern engineers look at these numbers and have no answers, because it wasn't just grand, it was impossible. The impossible foundation. Fellow archaeological detectives, let's start our investigation with the first mystery that baffled ancient builders. To create the temple's foundation, Solomon didn't want ordinary stones. He wanted the largest stones ever cut in Israel. The book of 1 Kings, chapter 5, verse 17, uses a specific expression, large stones and precious stones. Archaeologists who studied the platform of the Second Temple, built later in the same location, found blocks exceeding 400 tons. Now imagine this incredible number. 400 tons is the weight of 60 adult elephants. Imagine cutting that from a mountain without dynamite, without electric saws, without anything modern. The army of stone cutters. 80,000 men were assigned to this task alone, cutting stones. They worked in quarries scattered throughout the mountains surrounding Jerusalem. They woke before sunrise, walked to the extraction areas, and began the most dangerous work on the site. But here's what will blow your mind. You don't just hit the rock until it breaks, not when you need precision, not when every block must fit perfectly in the temple, and especially not when there's a rule that changes everything. The sacred silence rule. No sound of iron tools could be heard at the construction site. This is recorded in 1 Kings, chapter 6, verse 7. This meant the stones had to come ready from the quarries. Every cut, every angle, every surface, everything done away from the temple. The water expansion technique. The technique used was ancestral but honestly, absolutely brilliant. Listen to this incredible process. First, the cutters identified exactly where they wanted to split the rock. They drew lines using stones that were even harder than limestone. Then, they opened small, deep holes along these lines and inserted wedges of dry wood. Next, they poured water over the wood. The wood absorbed the water and swelled up. The pressure increased, and after hours, sometimes even days, the rock cracked exactly where they planned. No explosives, no noise of hammers hitting metal chisels, just the dull sound of stone splitting apart. But you know what? Cutting was just the first part. Each block needed to be shaped, smoothed, and measured. This required another type of worker, experienced men who knew how to read the architect's marks, because there were no detailed drawings on paper. Instructions came engraved right on the stones themselves, symbols indicating where that specific block would be placed in the temple. If you made a mistake, the block was useless. 400 tons of stone became waste. Now comes the part that killed more people than any other phase. Imagine this terrifying scene. A rope snaps under pressure, the stone suddenly stops, men in front fall, others are trapped under the block with no chance of escape. Accidents like this weren't rare. They were part of the brutal routine of this work. The transportation army, 70,000 men were designated exclusively to carry loads. They didn't cut, they didn't build, they only transported, and the technique they used seemed simple on paper, but was honestly infernal in practice. They built giant ramps of compacted earth going up and down the mountains. The stone was placed on thick tree trunks that functioned as rollers. Vegetable fiber ropes as thick as human arms were tied around the block. The brutal reality. Then began the most brutal work of the entire project, pulling. Hundreds of men held the ropes. A supervisor shouted rhythmic commands so everyone pulled at the same time. Pull, stop, reposition the trunks left behind, pull again. The stone moved centimeters, sometimes just a few fingers at a time. A 400-ton block could take weeks to travel 5 kilometers, and during all this time, the men slept next to the stone, ate there. They didn't let go until it reached its destination. The International Trade Challenge. But here's another mind-blowing mystery. 200 kilometers separated Jerusalem from the cedar forests of Lebanon, and Solomon needed thousands of trunks. How do you bring wood from another country without trucks? And how many men died along the way? The royal negotiation. Cedar was the noblest wood of the ancient world, resistant, aromatic, almost indestructible. It was used by kings to build palaces and temples, but it only grew in the Lebanese mountains. Israel didn't have any, so Solomon did what any leader would do. He bought it. The negotiation with Hiram, king of Tyre, is recorded in 1 Kings, chapter 5, verses 6 through 11. Hiram would provide specialized lumberjacks and all necessary cedar. In exchange, Israel would pay 20,000 kor of wheat per year, that's equivalent to more than 4 million liters, plus 20,000 baths of oil, another 2 million liters. This was an absurdly expensive commercial deal, but Solomon had no choice. Without cedar, there was no temple. The two-stage transport system. 10,000 Israelites were assigned to work in Lebanon. But you know what? They didn't stay there all the time. 1 Kings chapter 5 verse 14 explains the system: 1 month in Lebanon, 2 months at home. The transport was divided into 2 stages. First stage, by sea. The trunks were tied to each other, forming enormous rafts pushed and guided by smaller boats. These rafts floated through the Mediterranean Sea to the port of Jaffa, which today is part of Tel Aviv. Second stage, by land. From Jaffa to Jerusalem is about 60 kilometers. Each cedar trunk weighed tons. They used the same technique as with stones, smaller trunks as rollers, ropes, hundreds of men pulling. The master craftsman mystery. But building in silence was only part of the challenge, because the temple couldn't just be big, it had to shine. 27 tons of pure gold covering entire walls. How do you work with this quantity of precious metal? And who was the man Solomon brought from another country to do this? The sacred workshop. The heat was unbearable. Furnaces burned day and night, melting gold. Sweating men hammered thin plates over wooden molds. Others polished surfaces until they shone like mirrors. And in the center of everything, a man named Huram observed every detail. He was brought specifically from Tyre because of his legendary skill in working with precious metals and bronze. Fellow mystery hunters, what we've discovered today raises more questions than answers. How did ancient builders achieve what modern engineers consider impossible? The answer lies not just in their techniques, but in their incredible determination, precise organization, and willingness to overcome any obstacle, no matter how deadly. Recent archaeological studies suggest that the coordination required for such a project would have needed a level of administrative sophistication we rarely credit to ancient civilizations. This wasn't just brute force, this was genius-level project management executed 3,000